Hey guys, what do you call a snake who robs a bank? Unarmed. It's so stupid. So here's the thing about snakes. They used to have arms and they also had legs. Now, most of us don't believe that. Most of us think they slither everywhere they go. They're just some weird freaks of nature. Well, they are not. They're cool freaks of nature. Let's get that right. But also they used to have legs and arms. It has been found that in the snake's DNA, there's a genetic mutation that actually ruins the chance of them having arms. It's in the ZRS area of their DNA. If you're wondering what that means, what the ZRS is, it's, hold on, I can't remember it. It's the polarizing activity regulatory sequence zone of their DNA. Reading the genetic sequence, of course, they were able to find genetic mutations and things that would cause this kind of thing. But what's really weird is they did an experiment that proved it, and in the weirdest of ways. This weird little experiment involved mice and that sequencing from the DNA of snakes that showcases that the ZRS is responsible for snakes not having legs. They hooked those up together and boom, guess what? Those mice did not have legs. Poor little mice. Like, they get used for everything. They get eaten by snakes. They get used for DNA sequencing and mutations. Like, leave the poor little mice alone. But you know what? It's an important experiment. Very cool. But I just feel bad for the little mice out there, man. Boas and pythons both have remnants of these legs. These are called vestigal legs, and they're basically bones buried within their muscles. Now, if you own a ball python, you know exactly what I'm talking about. They're basically these little splinters that stick outside of the bottom of the snake. Now, there are some snakes that are considered advanced snakes. These would be cobras and vipers. They don't have the vestigal legs, and they're way more advanced than boas and pythons. Basically, boas aren't doing their homework. Pythons are skipping class. They're just not very advanced. They fell behind. They're like 4 years behind in classes. They're not doing so hot. This cracked me up. There's a gene that the researchers were focused on, and they named it the sonic hedgehog gene. No joke. This gene is responsible for embryonic development, and they found that it was linked to this exact issue of snakes not having legs or arms. They did find that the sonic hedgehog gene is actually active for the first 24 hours of a snake's life, meaning within this 24 hours, a snake is actively developing its leg bones. Basically, it just got fired. Like, the snake's like, all right, you're not doing your job well, get out of here, because it stops after 24 hours. After 24 hours, there is no more development of femurs or any type of leg bones, which actually can develop for a snake, but there's no more development and it seizes, and that's why snakes do not have legs. Moral of the story, take your Sonic the Hedgehog out of your ZRS. And that brings us to the topic of how the heck they slither, right? Like, what are their techniques? How do they slither? How do they get around? Now, I have to wonder, what was it like from the moment when most snakes didn't have legs to basically when they can now slither? Like, what happened in between? Because my idea is that they're just flopping around like fish, like all over the ground, a fish out of water, just flopping around, not able to move, not able to function. And also, how did they survive that, right? Because how did they get from A to B of like, oh no, we're a freaking snake, we got this? Like, how? We all know snakes slither, but did you know that snakes utilize different muscles and different forms of movement to get around different terrain? Think of it like shoes. You're not going to wear a pair of high heels to go running because you're going to break your ankle and it will not be a good time. But you also are not going to wear running shoes to the club because you're going to look like a crazy person. Totally mess up my point. I have seen a girl surf in high heels to prove a point once. And it was really cool, but also, like, obviously it just makes my point null and void. So we're going to ignore that and just talk about the clubbing and the running example. All stupid jokes aside, science.
It's serious.
So snakes need to move a certain way while you need to wear a certain pair of shoes to get around, right? Kind of the same thing. Let's just go there. With that, there is this serpentine movement, and the serpentine movement is the one that we always think about. It's that S formation that we see depicted in all types of pop culture and culture in general. This movement is not the one they like to use when they're relaxed, surprisingly enough, but they do use it to go across rough surface as well as water and when they want to get the hell away from you. The other 3 movements that snakes make are not as popular as the serpentine movement. They are the concertina, the side-winding, and the reptilinear. I can never say reptilinear. It's so hard for me. It's a tongue twister. Say it 10 times fast. Reptilinear. Oh my God, now I can do it. I can do it when I'm not thinking. I just can't think. Thinking is my worst enemy, I swear. Back to the video. In the concertina movement, snakes coil up fairly tightly and they spring their head forward, trying to make a lot of movement in that one big springy step. The side-winding movement is a little bit different and allows them to transverse higher, more vertical things like stairs or even rocky formations. With this movement, they move in like a wave formation, but they also at the same time push with the underside of themselves. This allows for them to gain traction on higher objects and to ultimately push them into higher locations. And finally, they use the rectilinear movement. This is a movement that they use when they're very relaxed, and Chili loves this one. With this type of movement, snakes use their specialized muscle group to slither into burrows that otherwise they would not be able to. All in all, I think snakes are one of the most respectable species in the animal community. They have evolved and transformed themselves not to only survive, but to adapt to the world around them and better live in different circumstances. They are very misunderstood in our culture and should be given the appreciation that they deserve. Go snakes! Woohoo!